The criticism of Justin Fields and how the Chicago Bears have fared at the end of fourth quarters really misses the point about what the young quarterback is doing and feels more like lazy analysis of just associating quarterbacks with wins and losses and not really actually looking at what the quarterback is doing.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lorin Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Bears. You can like Locked On Bears on Facebook. Join the Locked On Bears Facebook group for even more Bears talk. And make sure you hit the subscribe button on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel to keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today, and hopefully every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. On the show today, we expand on something we talked about a little bit earlier in the week about these questions and this narrative of Justin Fields in the fourth quarter, particularly late in the fourth quarter. Final drives. This narrative or this question of, is he not clutch? Is he unable to pull his team to these victories late in ball games? Because we've seen a number of them this season where the Bears have had the ball with under 4 or 5 minutes to go, and maybe they're down one score on the scoreboard, and there's an opportunity for Justin Fields and this Bears offense to go down, score, and potentially win the game and be the hero at the end. And we know the Bears have only won 3 games this season, and that often and almost every single time when they've had some of these late game opportunities, they have not been able to win these games. And so many people have been quick to put that all on Justin Fields' shoulders, and that's what I really want to expand upon a little bit today. We'll look at the premise of the argument here and where there's already flaws on the surface, but then we'll go through the prominent examples from this season of the Bears having the ball late in ball games to try and get a sense of, okay, how much is Justin Fields not being good enough, and how much are there other explanations? How much credit/blame should Justin Fields receive for the good and bad we see late in these games, and of course, the good and bad we see even before you get to that point? Because there's a certain surface level premise here that I think is flawed. That when you're looking at this and saying, oh, the Bears haven't been able to finish these games with victories, therefore Justin Fields is bad and isn't showing them he's clutch, it's immediately a flawed idea that it is solely the reflection of the quarterback. That when they win these games or lose these games, it's his fault. Right? It's his fault they're not finishing this games with W's. It's all on him to be able to make these plays happen. I understand that the comparisons come to, you think a guy like Tom Brady and what we saw on Monday Night Football, where he pulls off a miraculous comeback late in that game, scores a couple of touchdowns late, and carries the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to a surprise victory there. But or you think of Patrick Mahomes doing those sorts of things, and some of the elite quarterbacks doing these things. And 2 things: one, we often discredit the plays that other players make in allowing those quarterbacks to be able to have those victories. That players have to catch those balls that Tom Brady throws, and players have to block on those plays for Tom Brady in the pocket. Oh, and his defense has to make a few stops along the way to hold the New Orleans Saints to 16 points on Monday Night Football to allow him to win with just 17 points. And we don't crush Patrick Mahomes for losing when Travis Kelce fumbled this weekend, and the Chiefs end up falling short. But we do crush Justin Fields when we look back and forget that, Emir Smith-Marsette fumbles the game away against the Minnesota Vikings. And there's an example of Justin Fields not being clutch, not being able to will his team to victory, despite doing everything in his power and the supporting cast around him not being able to do so. The other side of this is that we also shouldn't hold Justin Fields to those Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes level of expectations. He's a second-year quarterback. He started barely 16 games in his career, really, I'll bet essentially like a little more than a full season of starts under his belt in his first year in an offense, surrounded by a supporting cast of a terrible defense and an offense that's inconsistent around him at best. So let's make sure the bar here is appropriate for Justin Fields. He should be playing well. He should be developing and growing as a passer. We shouldn't expect him to overcome every obstacle that gets in his way and outplay his entire supporting cast to be this hero to lead the Bears to more meaningless wins in an otherwise meaningless season. And so it's not the time to be overly concerned about how Justin Fields performs in these specific moments. But I also think when you look more closely at how Justin Fields performs in these specific moments, you're seeing a quarterback who's doing a lot of good and not a lot of bad. There have been mistakes, and I think there are a couple of moments in games and situations that you can point to and say, yeah, Justin Fields needed to be better there, needs to keep developing as a passer, and needs to grow. And not that he single-handedly cost his teams the game, but there are a couple moments you can say, yeah, he wasn't good enough in that spot, and the Bears ended up losing. The rest of the moments you can pretty well point to and say Justin Fields did everything reasonable within his power, and it still wasn't enough because he doesn't have receivers who can consistently catch or not fumble balls, or an offensive line that can consistently give him a chance to be able to throw balls downfield, or a defense that can make a stop or two late in these games to give Fields a chance to drive down and score for a potential victory. So we'll go through some of the specific examples here that really illustrate this point from this season, earlier in these games, next on Locked On Bears. The Locked On Bears podcast is brought to you by our friends at Turo. Turo is the world's largest car sharing marketplace. With Turo, you can book any car you want, whenever you want it, from a community of local hosts. Browse a huge selection of vehicles for just about any occasion or budget across the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, and now Australia as well for some of our international Locked On Bears listeners. You can book a spacious SUV or a minivan for a family road trip. You can get a classic or luxury car for a special event, maybe a birthday or a holiday, or if you just need to get from point A to point B on a budget, they've got plenty of affordable economy cars as well. Or maybe you're thinking about buying a new car, maybe a new electric vehicle. You can test drive one via Turo and really get a sense of how that car might fit in your everyday life. Many Turo hosts can even deliver the car right to you wherever you are. Every trip is backed by liability insurance. Terms, conditions, and exclusions apply. Forget boring rental cars and find your drive at Turo.com. Forget the narrative and the questions about why can't Justin Fields win these games for the Chicago Bears. As we said, the premise itself is already a flawed point to try and hold Justin Fields to. But when you start to really even get to the specific examples from games this season, it really just doesn't hold water. I find it so interesting that the criticism and hyper-analysis is on Justin Fields not finishing these games. And why is he getting more criticism for those moments than, how about the games that just haven't even been that close? Like the first game against the Packers in week 2, or the game against the Cowboys. It's like, all of a sudden, those are fine or understandable, and those aren't criticism why couldn't he keep up with the Cowboys or the Packers in those games? It's why in all the games that he did so much work to make them close, was he unable to finish those games with victory? And why are these the only moments that go on the quarterback and only the quarterback, as opposed to the other moments that should also then give the quarterback credit for when you match up. So let's go through some of these specific games where the Bears had the ball late and weren't able to finish through, because I think there's a number of examples from the season that really illustrate this point. Let's start back October 9th, week 5 against the Minnesota Vikings. The Bears in that first half, you remember the Vikings offense just crushes them, moves the ball up and down the field over them, and it's 21-3 in that second quarter. Bears get a late touchdown at the end of the half to make it 21-10, but still overcoming an 18-point deficit in the first half. Justin Fields drives the team down in the third quarter. Velus Jones gets the score. They get a couple of Cairo Santos field goals. And all of a sudden, early in the fourth quarter, the Chicago Bears take a 22-21 lead with about 9.5 minutes to go in that game. And so all of a sudden, the Bears have the lead. And you're not hearing anybody give Justin Fields the credit for coming back from an 18-point deficit. It was 21-3. The Bears scored, math tells me, 19 unanswered points to make it 22-21. The defense then goes on to give up a 75-yard, 7-minute drive for the Vikings to take the lead back again. For some reason, that's not part of the conversation of why the Bears lost in this game, because everyone points to the last drive of the game. Justin Fields gets the ball on his own 25-yard line with 2.5 minutes to go, 2:26, drives down, gets a couple of first downs, and then, of course, completes a pass to Smith-Marsette. He tries to make a play. Cameron Dantzler pulls the ball out of his hands. It's a turnover. Bears lose. Justin Fields completed 4 passes on that drive and was sacked once, but completed 2 first downs, and that Smith-Marsette play was supposed to be another first down, and the wide receiver fumbles. There's not more that Justin Fields could have done in that game, but it's an example of the Bears having the ball with a 1-possession deficit late in the fourth quarter, and they can't win. Justin Fields not clutch, right? Justin Fields unable to finish those games. Well, that one, not on Justin Fields. He gave them a fourth quarter lead. The defense blew it, and his wide receiver fumbled. That's the story of that game. It's not a reflection of, Justin Fields not being able to drive his team down and win those games. There's plenty of criticisms you can have about Justin Fields and this Bears offense. These are not to say that Fields is perfect in these late game situations, or that he doesn't make mistakes, or that he doesn't have more growth and development to work on. But it's not this idea that he's absolutely blowing it for his team every time he has the ball late in games. You go to the next week, Thursday Night Football against the Washington Commanders. Justin Fields finds Dante Pettis for that kind of fluky but still counts 40-yard touchdown pass, kind of a busted coverage thing, to take a 7-3 lead in the third quarter. The Bears continue that lead into the fourth quarter. They gave up a field goal, but it's still 7-6 early in that fourth quarter. The defense eventually gives up that go-ahead touchdown for the Commanders with about 7.5 minutes to go. But what do you see late in that game? Justin Fields, down 5, 12-7, starts at his own 38-yard line, gets a couple of first down, drives the Bears all the way down to the 5-yard line at the goal line, right? They're trying to get a couple balls in the end zone. There's a pass interference flag that's not called that people are going back and forth on. And even on 4th and goal with 35 seconds left, throws it to Darnell Mooney in the end zone, who bobbles the catch and is hit out of the end zone before finishing the catch. That if Darnell Mooney holds onto that ball when it first hits him in the hand, it's a game-winning touchdown drive for Justin Fields. But instead, because of the bobble from Darnell Mooney, it's a turnover on downs, the Bears lose, and once again, Justin Fields not clutch. Doesn't get any credit for driving them down to the 4-yard line and throwing a pass, a catchable pass into the end zone. Doesn't get any credit for having the lead earlier in the game or any of that. It's, because of what happened on one final play, I guess he's not any good, not any clutch late in these football games. The examples just really continue. It's not to say he was perfect in all these moments. And we'll go through a couple of times where, Justin Fields wasn't perfect in these moments and had a turnover, had a mistake or two, and maybe even cost his team in some of these situations. But the evidence in favor of what Justin Fields has done far outweighs the few mistakes we've seen Justin Fields make in these moments, and we'll give you both sides. We'll look at the bad too, in addition to the good, next on Locked On Bears. The Locked On Bears podcast is brought to you by our friends at BetOnline, the number one place we recommend for all of your sports betting needs, your info, your stats, your news, your analysis, the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and esports. They have it all at betonline.net. This weekend, you're going to be watching football with no Bears on your screen. These games aren't going to be as exciting, but if you put a little money down, a little action on the game, it just brings a little bit more of that juice and makes it that much more exciting. And BetOnline is always going to be the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. So head to their website today or use your mobile device to learn more about all the different trends and action happening each and every day. BetOnline, where the game starts. I want to keep working through a few more of these examples of Justin Fields' fourth quarter comeback opportunities that, again, seems to be some sort of narrative here that he's not good enough in these moments, or that you get, especially non-Bears fans. I think most people listening to this podcast aren't thinking Justin Fields is terrible. I've heard Bears fans question, like, hey, should we be concerned about this? But it's Packers fans, it's outside of Chicago people that are saying, hey, he keeps losing these games. He must not be good in the fourth quarter and must be blowing it for his team, when that's really not the case. Let's move ahead to week 9 against the Miami Dolphins, because they beat the Patriots then after the Commanders game, got blown out by the Cowboys. Okay. Dolphins game. Bears playing a really good Dolphins team, as we've seen this, at least a really good Dolphins team when they're healthy this season, when they've had Tua Tagovailoa and stuff. And once again, similar story. Bears get down big in the first half. It's 21-10 in the second quarter. Fields drives them back, scores a couple of times in the second half. It scores late before the first half to make it 21-17, and then a couple of back and forth touchdowns. Scores with just under 12 minutes left in the fourth quarter to make it a 3-point Bears deficit at 35-32. They'd been down 10, they had been down 11 at multiple points throughout the course of that game. But once again, in the fourth quarter, it's a one-possession game situation. Some back-and-forth drives. Bears get the ball back one last time. 2.5 minutes to go. Down 3. All right, Justin Fields. It's money time. It's go time. Gets a first down. Drives going and gets sacked. Gets an incomplete pass. And then you get to 4th and 10 at your 42. One of the most difficult situations to be. You're thinking almost Hail Mary. Justin Fields, if I remember right, escapes the pocket to the right side. Throws. Hits Equanimeous St. Brown in the hands for a first down. Dropped. Incomplete pass. Bears lose. Super catchable ball, right where you want the ball to be. Unable to hold on to it. Past the sticks. Would have kept the drive alive. Would have put them, I think, in field goal range or really close to field goal range. So no guarantee that play or, the play against the Minnesota Vikings where Amir Smith-Marsette, it's no guarantee that those were going to be wins against those opponents if Smith-Marsette and Equanimeous St. Brown hold on to the football as you would expect an NFL caliber wide receiver to do. But it's to say that the failures in both of those games and in the Commanders game there, were not on Justin Fields. He completed passes on the last play of all 3 of the games we've talked about. Completed pass to Amir Smith-Marsette, fumbled. Completed pass to Darnell Mooney, caught outside of the end zone. He didn't complete the pass to Equanimeous St. Brown, but threw an accurate catchable ball on all 3 of the passes. Dropped by Equanimeous St. Brown. Bears lose. Not because Justin Fields didn't throw a catchable ball there, but because the receivers and the supporting cast were not able to properly support him. You can start to look at some of the other games here, right? Against the Packers, more recently. This past weekend, he threw an interception. He threw 2 interceptions in the fourth quarter. He did give them a 19-10 lead in the third quarter, had a 9-point lead that the defense proceeded to blow and allow 19 points in the fourth quarter. But, first interception, terrible route by Equanimeous St. Brown that even St. Brown admitted, I needed to be better on that play and was kind of pretty well. No one's saying directly it was St. Brown's fault from the team perspective, but we on the outside can see first interception really a lot more St. Brown's fault than Justin Fields' fault. Defense then goes and gives up a 46-yard touchdown run to Christian Watson. And then the second interception was a bad forced throw from Justin Fields. No doubt. The Packers game is a closer to an example of, Fields made some mistakes in the fourth quarter. Is he the sole reason to blame for them losing that game? Absolutely not. He gave them a 19-10 lead in the second half. Like that, ideally, your defense can give up a field goal or something, or maybe even a touchdown, right? But for for him to be able to at least give them the lead ahead of time is something he deserves credit for, and he doesn't deserve all the blame for them blowing that complete lead. Or, you look at 2 games earlier against the Atlanta Falcons, right? The Bears get the ball late in the fourth quarter again, and that one also ends in a Justin Fields interception. He overthrows David Montgomery, and it's picked off. It's kind of tipped by Montgomery, but regardless, yeah, that's a turnover at the end of that drive that is not an accurate ball from Justin Fields. It's also a drive where he was injured on the first play of that drive and then ran the ball again, and so is throwing with an immense amount of pain in his left shoulder. You still don't want him to throw the interception, and they still lost the game, and it still ends with a Justin Fields interception, but you're sort of willing to... I don't feel like that interception was some sign of like recklessness or an inability by Justin Fields to finish out games. Maybe it's an inability to finish games with an AC joint injury in your shoulder. Like I'll concede that. Justin Fields is not very good at finishing fourth quarters of games while injured. Like, sure, no one is good at finishing fourth quarters of game while injured. Oh, and the Bears had a 17-7 lead in the first half of that game that the defense also was complicit in blowing. And, the Lions game started the fourth quarter with a 24-10 lead. Gave the team a 2-touchdown lead in the fourth quarter of Lions in Week 10. Of course, Fields threw a pick 6 that you can definitely call a mistake and something that, was his fault and that he needs to be better at. And, he took a couple of sacks on the final drive that he maybe could have thrown away. Like, there's moments in there that you can look at and say, yeah, Fields made some mistakes there and needed to be better in some fourth quarter moments of these games. But you don't look at those and say, oh, Justin Fields was the reason the Bears lost to the Lions. They were up 24-10. He gave them a 14-point lead. Or Justin Fields was the reason the Bears lost to the Falcons. He had a 17-7 lead and he was injured. Or Justin Fields not the reason they lost to the Green Bay Packers. Had a 9-point lead in the second half. Justin Fields was not the one who allowed 19 points to the other team. Justin Fields did not run the poor route from St. Brown that got picked off, right? He made mistakes in these games, but it wasn't the back-breaking mistake that caused the game, right? He's not throwing the pick 6 on the final drive. He's not throwing the pick 6 in the end zone or throwing the interception in the end zone to cost them games. We have, 3 to 4 examples of Justin Fields giving his team a chance late in these games, and 1 or 2 examples of Justin Fields making a couple of mistakes here in some of these moments, plus the other games where he's given his teams leads and done so much more to put them in position to win. Like, if anything, you can criticize Justin Fields for not closing out these games before late in the fourth quarter, right? Like, extend the lead even farther. Like, in some of these games, they got a lead, and then the offense kind of slows down a little bit from there. I think Luke Getsy has taken the foot off the gas a few times, and I think he deserves some of the criticism here. Certainly think the wide receivers deserve the criticism for dropping passes, fumbling passes, running poor routes that lead to interceptions. I think the offensive line for a lot of the season has deserved some of the blame here as well for not giving Justin Fields a lot of time to throw and make plays in these late fourth quarter situations. Offensive line has gotten better. I think the receivers have slowly gotten better. I think Luke Getsy has had some ups and downs, but is otherwise, generally speaking, a competent offensive coordinator, but has some head-scratcher moments in there that you wonder about a little bit. But throughout all of it, you've seen Justin Fields get better. And you've seen enough from Justin Fields outside of those fourth quarter moments to not feel like it's a point to be concerned now. Maybe a year or two from now, if you had a really solid supporting cast, pretty good defense, some decent wide receivers, and an offensive line, and Justin Fields is getting in these moments and throwing the interception on the last drive of the game, or fumbling on the last drive of the game, or, turnover on downs, making poor decisions late in these football games with a supporting cast a couple of years from now, that's when we can have the conversation about Justin Fields not being clutch, Justin Fields not having good decision-making in these big moments and shrinking in some of these otherwise big moments. But I think given where he is in his young career and given where the Chicago Bears are in the team rebuilding process and just team growth process in general, I think we should be much more focused on the good that he's done in the first 3.5 quarters and how much he's had to individually shoulder to put them in a position to even try to come back and win in the fourth quarter. That's where we should really be. That's what's most important at this stage of the process. Where we should be most excited about is how many opportunities he has even given them to have that shot, as opposed to just being blown out, like we saw against the Dallas Cowboys, where he just isn't able to get them even that close. It's impressive what he's been able to do up to this point, and I don't think it's realistic to expect him to not only get them back, give them a lead early in a game, blow that lead, and also get them back in with a chance to win, but then also be perfect in these clutch moments. It's not a realistic expectation for everything we've talked about going on around Justin Fields. It's not about making excuses for Fields. It's about seeing the full picture. It's about seeing everything he does in the games, watching all the throws, watching the development, understanding the game situations and the flow of the game and how he has gotten into certain situations. And it's about not just looking at the final score, glancing at the box score and seeing the Bears had the ball late and not being able to win these games, right? You have to apply the proper context and understanding of not only where Fields is in his career and on this team, but also what is happening in these games. And that's where this discussion has gotten off the rails in social media conversations, and why people outside of Chicago really are missing the boat on this one, and why I wanted to take today's podcast to really kind of dive in more specifically in some of these game moments to get the nuance and the bigger picture that gives you a better understanding of what Fields is. And so if you're at the water cooler or at the bar with your friends that are maybe fans of other teams, and they try and jab you about how Justin Fields has performed in some of these fourth quarters, you can have some evidence, some nuance, some reason, something to back it up and say, well, actually, it's not that simple, and you're putting way too much on the quarterback there and discounting everything else that the quarterback does, and also not fully accounting for the direct individual examples of other players not being good enough. It's not just, the receivers are bad, no one is open, and Justin Fields can't find anybody. It's literally a wide receiver fumbling, a wide receiver dropping a pass that hit him in the hands, and Darnell Mooney bobbling a pass out of the end zone. Like, you can literally point to specific spots where the wide receiver directly was at fault and was not good enough and ended drives for the Chicago Bears. Not just guys not being able to get open or not being able to force a missed tackle. It's guys directly messing up for their quarterback when it's not the quarterback's fault. Hopefully that can put a decent bow on this discussion and not have to have this debate rage on any longer. But I'm sure at some point, the Vikings or Lions game, the Bears will have the ball again, down one score late in the fourth quarter, and we'll be right back into the same boat. But remember this conversation the next time that happens in one of these Bears football games. If it does happen, you can be sure we're going to break it down for you right here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit that subscribe button to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. If you're looking for, thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. If you're looking for your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL podcast. I got to co-host Locked On NFL yesterday with Luke Braun from Locked On Vikings. We didn't talk about the Vikings or the Chicago Bears. We looked at the league from the league-wide perspective, all things NFL. We talked about Baker Mayfield before he was claimed by the Los Angeles Rams. I mentioned the Los Angeles Rams as a likely destination for him. We looked at some of the different options and dynamics there. We poured one out for the Atlanta Falcons and some of the other teams eliminated or that we feel like are probably donezo based on how the recent games have gone. And we made fun of the Indianapolis Colts for how they blew it against the Dallas Cowboys. And we also made fun of the New Orleans Saints for how they blew it against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So go check out Locked On NFL, yesterday's Locked On NFL, for more from me from that show. And then make sure you tune in back to Locked On Bears tomorrow for your next opportunity to bear down.